Let me just ask your opinions on the following, and that is, there's been a lot of talk, some out there arguing, well, Assad is a bad individual, but he's better than the alternative. I've often said that irrespective of what happens in this conflict, given both the nature of the Assad regime and everything that's transpired, that as long as Assad is in power, or those close to him are in power, given what has occurred in Syria, Syria will always be ripe for a Sunni resistance to his rule, that it's difficult to go to someone who's had their family slaughtered, who has faced deep oppression, and somehow ever get them to fold into a national unity under the rule of an individual responsible for these sorts of horrific acts. Do you share that view that it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for Syria to ever be peaceful and unified as long as someone with as much blood in his hands as Assad is in power?
I strongly agree with that statement, Senator Rubio. Assad has used chemical weapons to kill at least 1,400 of his own civilians, including several hundred children. As we noted earlier in the hearing, we had to witness on our own televisions in a manner that was inappropriate for young children to be in the living room when these scenes were being shown, the way the Assad forces were liquidating the city of Aleppo and slaughtering civilians and making it impossible for relief organizations to be there. So I agree 100% with your statement.
The Assad system is exactly what you described, Senator, because, as Jeremy said, it is absolute brutality against the entire population, with some exceptions of Syria. Anybody who gets in the way gets thrown in jail, gets tortured, and a mass slaughter of hundreds of thousands of civilians, poison gas, all of that. It's possible to imagine scenarios where Assad is left in power as a figurehead, as part of some kind of compromise that countries in the region and outside of the region agree to, as long as the system goes away. But as long as that system, which only goes on one speed, which is oppression, full out, continues, you're not going to have peace in Syria, and without peace in Syria, you're not going to have peace in the region.
Yeah, I guess the broader point I've always been driving, and it sounds like you both either directly agree or largely agree with, is that there are a lot of people that talk about this notion that Assad is terrible, but he's better than the alternative. And I guess my argument is, as long as Assad is there, given everything that's transpired, you are basically providing the fuel and the conditions, even if ISIS is wiped out. You already see Jabhat al-Nusra, or whatever their new name now is, stepping into that void. In essence, given everything that's occurred, there will always be a Sunni resistance that will tend towards radicalization in some cases if no other alternative is available. And I just make the argument to people that Assad is one of the reasons why we have an ISIS. He is not a counter to ISIS. He is in many ways one of the reasons that accelerated the rise of ISIS and those radical Sunni elements within Syria. I know I'm running out of time, and I know you've had a long hearing, so let me just ask you this. There's also some discussion out there about basically figuring out a way for the United States to leverage or to peel Russia off of their alliance with Iran, and in particular work jointly together on trying to defeat ISIS in Syria and beyond. But I guess my point is, how realistic do you think that sort of strategy is, and what would we have to give up, in your estimation, in other parts of the world in order to entice Vladimir Putin to both cut ties with Iran, or at least the alliance they've established with Iran, albeit an alliance of convenience, and also become more active participants in the fight against ISIS? How realistic is that strategy, which I know others have flirted with, and what would we probably have to give up in other parts of the world to make that something that Putin would find enticing?
Senator, the United States of America tested that proposition over the last 6 months, and the test failed. We tried to enlist them in a productive manner in Syria, and their military operations were imprecise, counterproductive, and they did things in the name of counterterrorism that actually counterproductive to our efforts. In other words, taking out the moderate forces that could be a leave-behind force in Syria. So I think I agree with the premise of your question, and I don't believe that we could do a grand bargain with Russia where we outsource the ISIS fight or somehow enlist their effort to moderate Iran's influence.
Specifically on the ISIS fight, absolutely not. Other than carpet bombing civilians, there's nothing they really can do militarily in this campaign. the larger question of Iran, assuming we have what I would consider a healthy strategy towards Iran, which we didn't in the last administration, they're working on it now in this administration, then there are areas where you can try to peel off Russia because Russian and Iranian interests are not identical. But that is a longer-term effort, and it shouldn't start with giving them any invite to the Raqqa battle.